Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Dear friends, today I'd like to speak about the perfection of truth, continuing our series about the paramis that were developed by the Bodhisattva over many lifetimes before he became a Buddha. In the case of this perfection of truth, the Satya Parami, it's very often connected with something which is called, in the Pali language, Satyakiriya, which is making a truth or a statement of truth, sometimes called in English an asseveration of truth. And a good example of a Satyakiriya we recite very frequently, for example, in the Ratana Sutta. They give many statements about the powers and accomplishments of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And at the end of each line, it says, Etena Satyavajena Hotu Te Jayamangalam, which means, by the power of this truth, may you obtain the joyful victory. Sometimes it's very common for a monk to say, for me, there's no other refuge. The Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha are my only refuge. By the power of this truth, may you be well. By the power of this truth, may you be happy. So I'm making some kind of statement about myself, which should be true. If it's not true, it won't work. But if it's a true statement, it's powerful. Now, these days, we live in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty about the truth, isn't there? Because thinkers and activists and politicians and leaders say all kinds of things that are not necessarily true. But and then you have different people in a competition, or you have artificial intelligence, and it makes statements which on the surface is plausible. It kind of looks like something that might be true, but it seems to be then we're in a morass of things that might be true, but not necessarily true. We can't really trust that just because you read something on the internet or just because a powerful person says something doesn't mean that you necessarily should believe it. And it's a very uncomfortable, miserable condition when we don't feel confident or that there's people that we trust, that when they speak, that what they say is going to be true. On the other hand, there can be occasions that you could think of in your regular life where there may be the family or the community or the group is in some kind of a state of confusion or distress. And then an intelligent person will make some observation from their own experience that cuts through all of the confusion and is a true statement. And it's just like there's a storm going on, and all of a sudden the storm becomes calm, and you have a feeling of peace and comfort because at least you know what's true. Even if it's not a pleasant truth. I could think like if you have a serious illness and you don't know what it is, you just have all these symptoms, and you go to this doctor and that doctor and read all kinds of different things, but you still don't know what you have, and you don't know what to do about it because you don't know what you have, and then eventually you get to the right doctor, and the thing that he knows is the thing that is actually matching for you, and he says, you have cancer and you need surgery, and I know how to do that. And even though it's a horrible diagnosis, in a way, you feel, finally, I know what the situation is. And so the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. And it was like that. He was a doctor. He was, in a way, giving us bad news about dukkha and about clinging. But at least we feel comfort in understanding, being able to understand that, yes, we can trust that. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. I'm going to start by reading a little short verse about the baby quail, and then which gives a mythological kind of a statement about the power of the truth. This is in the Charya Pitaka, which is the book of poems about the Bodhisattva in the past lives that we've been reading for the past few weeks. The baby quail said, I was a baby quail in Magadha. I was young, with wings unsprouted, just a scrap of meat in the nest. With food she brought in her beak, my mother nurtured me. I survived through her touch, for I had no physical strength. 1 year in the hot season, the forest caught fire. It came toward us, a conflagration with a blackened trail. The fire roared and rumbled, with great crests of flame gradually burning closer to me. Alarmed and terrified at the fierce fire, my mother and father abandoned me in the nest, saving themselves. I beat my feet and wings, but I had no physical strength. When, unable to leave, I thought this: those to whom I ought to run, scared and trembling with fear, have escaped, leaving me behind. How should I act today? There is the quality of virtue in the world, truth, purity, and mercy. By this truth, I will make a supreme declaration of truth. This is Satyakiriya. By the power of the Dhamma, recollecting the former victors, relying on the power of truth, I made a declaration of truth. Now here he's addressing the god of the fire. I have wings that do not fly. I have feet that do not walk. Mother and father have fled. Jataveda, the fire, go back. As I declared this truth, the great crested flames withdrew 16 leagues, as if they had come to water. There is no one equal to my truthfulness. This is the perfection of truth. So the thing that I love about this verse is that it's not that he's making some claim about his greatness or his power or his strength, but instead he's actually declaring his weakness, declaring the weakness of his body, which is the truth that he has at this time. And so if you have a feeling that you have to pretend to be great, pretend to be mighty, pretend to be strong, and act as if you are more than you are, then you won't be able to get this power. But if you have the truth to know with complete honesty just how you are, and to be able to say that truthfully, then it can cause others, like the God of the fire, to become merciful. A person who is truthful in that simple way is a magnet for compassion and mercy and loving kindness. And so this is a power of truth, is that the truth has the quality of purity, and it makes it possible to turn back, to bring out compassion in another. Of course, in this case, the fire has been personified. There are many, many cases in the Jatakas where it seems like the Satyakirya is almost like a miraculous power. So it's a magical power. And in that sense, it is drawing on the previous traditions that it existed in the Vedic Brahmanical traditions at the time, that the priests would know certain ways of chanting that had been handed down, and those chants would be powerful. And if they recite those verses correctly, then it can cause a change in fortune, cause victory in war, or cause protection. And the Buddha is drawing on that tradition of a recitation having a magical power, but then in a way he turns it this is what the Buddha does. He takes things that people already believe, and he raises their understanding to a better understanding, a more accurate understanding. And in this case, I think what we would have to say is that because of acknowledging his weakness, the Bodhisattva attracted the compassion of the God of the fire in that mythological story. And so that's one of the powers of the truth. There's another sutta, which I'm not reading tonight, but I'm just going to mention it, and that is the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, or the exposition on the elements. In that sutta, the Buddha says that there are 4 vows that one should develop wisdom, one should protect the truth, one should cultivate generosity, and one should practice for peace. This is a really powerful sutta. And one of the statements in that sutta is that one should protect the truth but that sutta does not explain what it means to protect the truth. But the sutta I'm going to read you, the Chunky Sutta, does explain how to protect the truth. This is a longer sutta. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to start at the point where the Buddha starts the meat of his discourse. This is the Chunky Sutta. He's speaking with a Brahmin priest, who's actually a very wise and considerate Brahmin priest named Bharadvaja, who's heard of the Buddha's wisdom and excellence. And in a very sincere way, he comes to the Buddha to ask and to learn. So Bharadvaja is open-minded and happy to learn. And he explains how the preservation of truth is defined. And there's like a comparison between the way the Brahmins define the protection of truth and the way the Buddha defines it. And we can see that he's starting by pointing out ways in which there's a kind of a common ground. So he's asking, Worthy Gautama, how do you define, I have to go back, excuse me, this is the protection of the truth. So the way that he's criticizing, the question that's given is, this is back a couple of pages from what I pointed out to you. Regarding that which by the lineage of testament by canonical authority is the ancient hymnal of the Brahmins, the Brahmins come to this categorical conclusion. This is the only truth. Everything else is futile. And they ask what the Buddha has to say about the Brahmin teaching. He says, Bharadvaja, is there even a single one of the Brahmins who says this? I know this. I see this. This is the only truth. Everything else is futile. And he says, no. Nobody is saying it from their own knowledge. They're only speaking from the lineage of the teaching that has been handed down by the canonical authority in the ancient hymnal. And then he says, well, is there any of your teachers, or your teacher's teacher, or anyone going back 7 generations who says, I know this, I see this? No. Well, what about the ancient seers of the ancient times? The ones who were supposed to be the authors of these hymnals, did even they say, we know this, we see this? No, they can't say it. So then the Buddha says, suppose there's a queue of blind men, each holding onto the one in front. The first one does not see, the middle one does not see, the last one does not see. In the same way, it seems to me the Brahmin statement turns out to be like a queue of blind men. The first one does not see, the middle one does not see, the last one does not see. So isn't the Brahmin's faith baseless? And the Brahmin replies, They don't just honor because of faith, but also because of oral transmission, also because of a reasoned train of thought and acceptance of a view after deliberation. But the Buddha says, even though you have full faith in something, it may be vacuous, hollow, and false. And even if you don't have full faith in something, it may be true and real. Even if you endorse it, even if it's transmitted from your teachers, even if you've thought about and deliberated about it, it still might be either vacuous, hollow, and false, but something that you have not thought about, not deliberated about, not heard about from your teachers could still be true. So for a sensible person who's preserving the truth, this is not sufficient to come to this categorical conclusion. Only this is true. Everything else is futile. So when somebody tells you something, it might be true and it might not be true. You need to find out. And if you have an idea, something you believe in, it might be true and it might not be true. And then based on this thing that you believe in, you can think and ponder and come to a lot of logical inferences to prove a point. And all of your logic and conclusions only depends on the truth of the initial premise that you start from. I have a real example from this. At one point, I received some criticism about something, and at that time, I became defensive, and I looked back through my notes, and I thought I found the evidence that they were false, and I was correct. And I pulled out and I said, "Look, here's the evidence." I'm going back through my emails and stuff. You see there? That proves it. I'm wrong. I'm right, and you're wrong. And I was very hot about it, and I was really thinking like what I was doing was so virtuous, and I was trying so hard, and I was trying to be good, and then you accuse me of something, and really getting excited about it. And later on, the person who spoke to me, they pulled back some other emails, some different evidence. Oh no! All of my getting on the platform and making so many arguments to defend myself was all based on an incomplete look. I had seen one thing and I thought that proved it, but looking more deeply, it's not necessarily so. So, see, part of this is to be like humble about drawing a lot of inferences from a premise that might or might not be true, and try to look more closely. But everybody has their own story, and don't cling too much to your story. Okay, so now here's Bhavajeva is saying, Worthy Gautama, how do you define the preservation of truth? This is the Satcha Nurakatam. So Anurakatam is called protection. So, and this is in the other sutta that I mentioned where the Buddha said, you should protect the truth. He's using the same phrase. So the protection of the truth, or the preservation of the truth. And now the Buddha is going to explain it. If a person has faith, They preserve the truth by saying, "Such is my faith," but they don't yet come to a categorical conclusion. This is the only truth, everything else is wrong. If a person has a belief, has received an oral transmission, or has a reasonable reflection about something, or has accepted a view after contemplation, they preserve the truth by saying, "This is what I heard by oral transmission. This is what I understand by reasoned reflection. This is what I accept after contemplation." In that way, they're saying something true about the idea that they hold, but they're not yet coming to a categorical conclusion. So this is how to protect the truth. We do depend on the teachings of others and what we learn that's handed down to us by books and school books and teachers and mentors and parents, and the whole world in our culture is telling us so many different things. And actually, in order to make progress on our spiritual path, if we find a trustworthy teacher, if we accept something on faith because we trust that teacher, we don't yet directly understand it, but we can still get a benefit from that belief by following it, but still keeping an open mind. That's protecting the truth. This is how the preservation of truth is defined. But this is not yet the awakening to the truth. And Bharadvaja says that's how the preservation of truth is defined. He agrees. How do you define the awakening to the truth? So now here's about the path that we follow to make more progress until we're finally able to say, "I know, I see," that we're able to actually realize it for ourselves. You would take the case of a mendicant who's supported by a town or village. A householder or their child approaches and scrutinizes that mendicant for three kinds of things: things that arouse greed, that provoke hate, and that promote delusion. Does this venerable have any qualities that arouse greed? Such qualities that, were their mind to be overwhelmed by them, they might say that they know, even though they don't know, or that they see, even if they don't see. So if you judge that that teacher or that person who's speaking, who's telling you, supposedly telling you the truth, that broadcaster, that podcaster, that influencer, that ideologue, you say, do they have the qualities that arouse greed, such that their mind is likely to be overwhelmed by greed? And if you judge that that person can be overwhelmed by greed, then they might say something that's not true. They might say that they know and see, even though they don't know and see. They might encourage others to do what is for their lasting harm and suffering. So after scrutinizing them, you find that. But if you find that their bodily and verbal behavior is like someone without greed, and the principle they teach is deep, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful, sublime, beyond the scope of logic, subtle, comprehensible to the astute, and you see that it's not easy for someone who's greedy to teach such a profound teaching, then you may realize that it's not easy for someone with greed to teach this. And so perhaps you may conclude that teacher is free from greed. And likewise, for the qualities that provoke hate, you may see that that teacher is somebody who's without hate. And likewise, with the qualities that promote delusion. And if they are someone with those qualities, you don't need to trust them. But if they seem to be beyond delusion, then you could see that what they're saying may be true, because it's not easy for someone with delusion to teach this. So, having scrutinized the teacher, next they place faith in them. When faith has arisen, they approach their teacher. They pay homage. They actively listen. They hear the teachings. They remember the teachings. They examine their meaning. They accept the teachings after deliberation. And then enthusiasm springs up. They apply zeal, weigh it up, and strive. So this means that if this teaching is credible, then, and if you have faith, you trust that teacher. You trust this teaching, even though you don't yet fully understand it, then you try to do those practices. So you try to practice meditation. You try to sit still and be mindful. You try to purify your ethics and to follow the precepts that are suggested by that teacher. You try to simplify your life and get rid of things that create distractions and stir up sensual greed. All of those things we practice, and with the practice of meditation, we may quickly experience some of the results that are expected from this practice, and then we feel that enthusiasm, we feel that zeal, we want to practice more. And so with that they strive, and with that striving, eventually they directly realize the ultimate truth and see it with penetrating wisdom. That's how the awakening to truth is defined. I describe the awakening to truth as defined in this way, but this is not yet the attainment of truth. So there's still more to go. The attainment of truth, and Bharadvaja is saying, actually, we think the attainment of truth the same way. So the Buddha is trying to come to some teaching which is beyond what the Brahmins think is within their practice. So he asks, Brother Gautama, how do you define the attainment of truth? Okay, and here, this is a very interesting teaching. By cultivation, development, and making much of these very same things, there is the attainment of truth. That's how the attainment of truth is defined. I describe the attainment of truth as defined in this way. So once you have your eye-opening moment, you got a glimpse of the way to the end of suffering. You got a glimpse of Nibbana, but you're not yet there. You're not yet beyond desire. You're not yet beyond attachment. You're not yet beyond clinging to views. And yet you still have had that eye-opening moment that you realized that there is a way out of this dukkha, that there is Nibbana. And so the Buddha is saying, just keep doing the same thing. So the very same practices that bring you up to your stream entry, the awakening and the vision of the Dhamma, are the very same practices that you just continue doing over and over and over again until you get all the way there. But what quality is helpful for arriving at the truth? Striving is helpful for arriving at the truth. If you don't strive, you won't arrive at the truth. You arrive at the truth because you strive. This is called padahati. The padahati, I think he doesn't fully explain it in the sutta. There's 4 right efforts. So it's the effort to prevent an unwholesome thing, quality from arising in you. If an unwholesome thing has arisen in you and landed, it's making the effort to abandon, cut off, dispel, and remove that unwholesome quality. And then the wholesome qualities that you do not yet possess, it's making the striving, making the effort to bring about those wholesome qualities. And then if you already have some wholesome qualities, it's striving to sustain, continue, and grow those wholesome qualities, to make them come to their full development, to come to their fruition. So in this way, striving is not just like running around in circles, or it's not just like getting all excited and saying, yes, I'm going to try and try and try and try and try. The striving requires a certain amount of wisdom, so you're able to steer. So you've got to step on the gas, but you also have to steer. And actually, you have to know like when to accelerate and when to put on the brake. And you have to know when it's just enough just to stay in your lane and keep going. Another quality of striving, actually, and this comes back to the paramis, or the perfections, is when the Bodhisattva was cultivating the perfections, it took a long time. It took him many lifetimes. And so his striving was sustained. He didn't give up until he reached the goal. This is what a lot of meditators do. They might be extremely, have many really bad habits and be very unhappy or neurotic or something like that. And they encounter the Dhamma and they learn about meditation and they gain faith in a teacher and practice mindfulness, practice the suggestions of the teacher, and they experience some immediate results from it. in this one, going back, it said, that they practiced the protection of truth, and then they realized the awakening to the truth, right? And then they think, okay, I'm done. I've done enough. I've awakened to the truth, and my life is a lot better than it was, and I'll be fine. I'll just stop here. But the Bodhisattva didn't just stop. He had many, fantastic qualities, but he never stopped. He kept going until he fully attained. So it's the same way. If you want to wake up, you got to strive. That's what the Buddha is telling us here. Okay, what quality is helpful for striving? Weighing up the teachings is helpful for striving. And then he says, zeal is helpful for weighing up the teachings. I think what Bhante Sujata has translated as weighing up the teachings, what that means, in my opinion, is with mindfulness, you can look at inside of yourself, and you can evaluate and assess your own internal state. And you can say, when I'm practicing like this, are the wholesome qualities increasing or are they decreasing? When I'm practicing like this, are the unwholesome qualities increasing or are they decreasing? So you learn to have the mindfulness to recognize and see within yourself in a very honest way what are the wholesome qualities and what are the negative qualities, and to see, the wholesome quality is the quality that's conducive to reducing one's suffering, not bringing about more suffering, not causing harm to yourself or to anybody else. And if you see that when I follow these teachings, then my capacity to do harm or to cause harm to myself or to another is going less and less and less and less. That's the weighing up. Zeal is helpful for weighing up the teachings. Enthusiasm is helpful for zeal. Acceptance of the teachings after deliberation is helpful for enthusiasm. So the Buddha is not saying that it's all a mystical experience. You can use your intelligence and use your logical mind to say, to see whether what the teacher is suggesting is plausible. And then if it's plausible, if it's logically makes sense, then you can try it out. Sometimes the Buddha taught that mere logic is not enough, and sometimes people misunderstand that to say that logic is not part of Buddhism. But many, many, many times the Buddha used logic in order to clarify and explain his teachings and make them into something that it's possible for a human being to follow. So that's the meaning of that. And then examination of the meaning of the teachings. So if somebody offers you some Dhamma and you don't understand it, you better find out. So you could say, you could ask the teacher to explain more fully what that concept is that they're trying to explain. And you could search in the suttas to find more different teachings that teach you about the same thing. You could take one idea, like the idea of compassion, or the idea of truthfulness, or the idea of virtue, all of the important ideas in the suttas. And if you read many suttas, you see the Buddha thought about them in a lot of different ways. Sometimes he taught by explanations. Sometimes he taught by the examples he gives. Sometimes he uses humor. Sometimes he uses stories. So among all the different ways that the teachings are explained, if you keep looking, eventually it may click, and you'll be able to understand what the meaning is. And in our modern times, I recommend consulting modern people, intelligent teachers who came from a similar educational or cultural background that you came from. And they may be able to translate the Dhamma into a terminology that makes sense to you based on your educational background or your cultural background. And that kind of translation is perfectly okay, especially if you have a teacher who's realized something. And then in order to examine the meanings, you have to remember the teachings. If it goes in one ear and out the other, it's not going to help you very much. And if the teaching is to do some kind of a practice, like if the teacher recommends very frequently bringing up the thought of kindness every time you see as a living being. If you bring up the thought of kindness for them every single time you see one, and then you nod your head, and then you go out and you forget about it, and you see a lot of beings, but you never have a kind thought because you forgot to do what the teacher was recommending for you, so you won't get the benefit. But if you remember, is not only remembering the catechism or the list of what is the Four Noble Truths, what is the Eightfold Path, and so on like that, but remembering is also remembering to do the practices that you think are going to be helpful for you. And then remembering the teachings, before you can remember the teaching, you have to hear the teaching. Now, hearing the teaching, sutava, is a word that really means to learn the teaching. In the olden days, the only way they had to learn something was to hear it. They would typically hear the teaching, and they would, because they're in an oral culture, they've developed a memory that's able to hear something only one time or a couple of times, and make in their own mind an outline of the key points of the teaching that they've heard. And or else they can hear a teaching only one time or just a few times. They hear a teaching and they can memorize that teaching. And then if they've memorized the teaching, they can repeat it to themselves. And that's where the remembering comes. So while you're out and about driving or in the line of the grocery store or something like that, you can review your catechism and say, how many dhammas am I able to remember? What was it that the Buddha taught? And see, how much can you remember the things you heard about that were taught by the Buddha? And so, but you have to learn it first. Either you write it in a book, or you heard it being explained by a teacher, or you saw it being shown in the behavior of that teacher or someone who's setting a good example. And then learning in that way is supported by active listening. And active listening is supported by paying respect. And paying respect is supported by showing up, by approaching the teacher. And then faith is helpful for approaching the teacher. If you don't give rise to faith, you won't approach a teacher. You approach a teacher because you have faith. That's why faith is helpful. If you don't approach a teacher, you won't be able to respect them or pay homage to them. If you don't approach and get some respect for that teacher, you won't be able to actively listen to that teacher. If you don't actively listen, you won't learn it. If you don't learn it, you won't be able to remember it. If you don't remember it, you won't be able to examine the meaning. If you don't examine the meaning, you won't be able to accept the meaning after deliberation. If you don't accept the teaching, enthusiasm is not going to come up for you, and zeal is not going to come up for you. You won't have a chance to be mindful and look within and examine while you're practicing with these teachings. You won't have a chance to examine and find out whether or not those teachings work for you, because you never found the energy to actually practice with them. And then when you see which qualities are beneficial and helpful, then that will light a fire of your powerful striving. And with your striving, that will help with arriving. And then with arriving, you come to attainment. So all of this entire path, starting with things that are very simple, that even a child or somebody who just heard about Buddhism yesterday could still understand how logical and sensible it is. You've got to start somewhere. And that whole line of practice, from somebody who's an absolute beginner up to somebody who's a stream winner, up to somebody who's a trainee in the Dhamma, a noble trainee in the Dhamma, up to someone who's fully realized, that whole path is part of protecting the truth. And Bharjuva says, I asked Worthy Gautama about preservation of truth or protection of the truth, the Satya Anurakkhana. And he answered me. I asked him about awakening to the truth, and he answered me. I endorse and accept this, and I am satisfied with it. The awakening is called the Bodhi. So, Bodhi, before we awaken, it's like we're asleep or living in a dream world. But then when we awaken, we're awake, we can see it like it really is. So, he said, I've asked about the attainment of the truth. He's answered me. I endorse and accept it. Whatever I ask Worthy Gautama about, he has answered me. I endorse and accept this. I'm satisfied with it. Worthy Gautama, I used to think this. Who are these shavelings, fake ascetics, primitives, black spawn from the feet of our kinsmen, next to those who understand the teaching? But this is the difference. The Brahmins, were very respected, noble priests that had wealth, and they were consulted by kings. And so they would live with the upper echelons of society, and the ascetics had given up everything. They have no house, they have no home, they only have the bowl in the robes, and they just wander in the forest, and they live off of the scraps of food or the medicine that's given to them in charity by people. And so he was thinking that at first he used to think they were low. Coming from the feet, that's the feet that's considered the lowest part. But the Buddha inspired me to have love, confidence, and respect for ascetics. And with this, he requests to be remembered as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. And so this is the sutta, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about the power of the truth.
How is what you're speaking about related to the map not being the physical truth? It's the representation. It's the same thing about the word. It's not the truth.
Right.
Is this parallel to what we discussing?
I believe that a mythology is called a didactic fiction. And so you're not expected to literally believe. You don't have to think that the Buddha literally was born as a little quail and that he literally spoke to the fire god and the fire god made the fire stop. Instead, you can understand the moral of the story. And the thing about stories, stories are a double-edged sword because the mind is continuously making stories. It's just what the brain does. If you know the science of it, you know that the mind is constantly making stories. And stories are not the same thing as reality. So you could say that the reality is the truth, and the story is the way that the brain makes sense out of things and understands the truth. But the story is always not identical to reality. But nevertheless, stories can be for good or for ill. So some stories will help us to understand the truth intuitively. I'm pointing to my heart. So like in a heartfelt way, we can intuitively understand the significance of something by hearing a story. But then it's also true that there's a danger that if we're defending our ego, defending our position, defending our status, defending our fear, the mind can proliferate and spin up a lot of different stories that are actually not helping us, but are taking us in the opposite direction. So when we hear stories, it's like when you hear a teacher, you got to think, is this story increasing the good qualities in the mind? Or is it increasing the harmful qualities? Or does listening, pondering, thinking about this story actually stir up bad, negative, harmful qualities? So that's the Buddha does not ask us to take on faith things that are incredible, and yet Buddhism is filled with many, many, many different kind of stories. And those stories are given because that's how the human heart is able to understand what's significant. Give my greetings to those who are here online. Chintana Ryan, Samasiya Manal, Gregory Sean. And the person who just asked that question was Thomas, who's here in the room with us. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the name of the other sutta that also talks about preserving truth and live before?
It's number 140 in the Middle Length Discourses, and it's called, in Pali, the Dhatu Vibhanga, or the exposition of the truth of elements. In the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, they only have one short couple of sentences about protecting the truth. And what it says is that the truth is not deceptive, and Nibbana has an undeceptive nature. And that's really the ultimate. When the Buddha is speaking, he's saying, I know, I see. What does he know and see? It's not that he say, I know and see, I see that the sky is blue. No, he's saying, I know, I see the ultimate truth of Nibbana, that he has realized the deathless, he's realized the escape from samsara, and he's able to say directly from his own awakening, his own experience, he's able to make that statement. And we who have not yet come to that can weigh up and measure the Buddha's teachings according to all of the ideas given in this sutta, and that can tell us a very good guidance about how to go about it, to really decide whether we trust this Dhamma. Do we trust this Dhamma enough to really practice with it? Because if you don't trust, you wouldn't be willing to make the effort. You have to be able to trust it enough. But the Buddha is saying trust and verify. So you trust enough to make the effort, and then you look inside and you evaluate how your psychology is changing as a result of these understandings and these practices. So I'm not seeing questions, so I'm glad. I hope everybody's satisfied, and I thank you all for your patient listening. We can close by saying sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.